Giants Nation, welcome back to the Average Bobcast, your number one source for all things New York Giants content on YouTube and Spotify. And today's episode, we have a great episode for you guys. So we're going to talk about the Daboll Fired, and we're going to go into Joe Schoen, if he should stick around or what the ultimate plan there is. We're going to talk about Mike Kafka. We're going to talk about Jameis Winston. And we got a lot to talk about on the upcoming preview for the Giants versus the Packers this Sunday afternoon at MetLose Stadium. So with that, let's get started. I did post a video about immediate breaking news when Brian Daboll was fired and let go, as his time has come to an end with the Giants. And a lot of the losses this year were on him. A lot of the losses last year were on him. And I think, it's a shared experience for these losses with Brian Daboll and the defensive coordinator, Bowen, who also will be gone after this year, but I think he should have been the first domino to fall. And maybe that could have saved Daboll's job if they had got rid of Bowen and promoted someone else, or just started to begin a search and link some names around to get us excited about the future for the defense. Maybe that could have, helped his longevity here, but he didn't do that. Bowen still stays around. Brian Daboll is gone, and the other side of the shared responsibility falls on the shoulders of Joe Schoen. We could talk about Joe Schoen too, but I want to just dive into the Daboll stuff. And he is a good coordinator. He is a good assistant coach. I didn't think he did win the Coach of the Year in 2022. I did a full video about why he probably shouldn't have been and why that 2022 season was a fluke, and clearly it was. So I'll link that video up top, and you can go ahead and watch that for your viewing pleasure. And I did take a lot of time to do that and did do well. And I had a lot of good points in that I think, still stand through to when I did it through now, and why Brian Daboll was ultimately fired. The thing with the 2022 season, and just, when he was hired, he came in, they had Saquon, they had Daniel Jones, and they completely outperformed what they were doing, or what they should have been for that season, and it gave them a lot of hype. And maybe still, you don't want to talk about, hey, we shouldn't be winning games or having a winning season, right? I was so pumped that season. That was my first season having a YouTube channel, and I was super excited for it to go well, and it did. But it was almost like at the detriment, because they weren't there yet, but they completely outplayed their expectations. And my main concern with that was that although they did have that good season and they shocked the world, beat some good teams that they shouldn't have beaten, specifically like the Ravens in that game, they still went 1-4-1 in the division that year. And that's something that hasn't changed over the last few years and throughout Brian Daboll's tenure as the head football coach of the Giants. Is the losses to the Eagles, the losses to the Cowboys, Commanders, and they haven't been a dominant division presence in a very quite some time. So although they did have that good season, it was still like 8-6-1 or something along those lines. So it was good. It was good to get 8 wins, right? But I think there were still holes, and those holes got bigger and bigger as time went on, and the excuses kind of went away as the offensive line did look better, as they did get their, change quarterbacks, and they had, multiple different quarterbacks playing over the years. And none of them really looked all too good until Jaxson Dart started playing. So ultimately, it didn't work out for Brian Daboll. I think he can have success as a coordinator somewhere else. I did think it's weird when I hate when the New York Post does this, or there's reporters outside of his house waiting for him to go get the mail. I think that's super weird. Just leave him alone. He's gone. He's not a part of the team anymore. And yeah, he'll always be kind of spoken about as another head coach in the line of head coaches now, since the Giants had the divorce with Tom Coughlin and made him step down to get Ben McAdoo, and then Pat Shurmur, then Joe Judge, and then Brian Daboll. So again, the door continues now where we flip the switch to Mike Kafka, who comes in as the interim head coach. Kafka, he's super well respected around the NFL, and I've said this a number of times. I don't really understand why. I mean, he was an average player at best in the NFL, and he coached the Senior Bowl this last at the end of last college football season before the draft and that time period. So he is super well respected after that 2022 season. There were rumors of him, I believe, going for the Seahawks job, and the Giants kind of blocked that or whatever they did. They didn't allow him to leave the building and take, these interviews or something along those lines, right? So there is a sentiment around the rest of the league that Mike Kafka is a potential future head coach in this league. He interviewed for jobs to do so. That's not me saying it. It is a fact. That he was requested to interview for jobs. So he has how many games are left? 7 weeks, 7-week interview with the Giants to see if he wants to stick around and be the head coach. I still, no matter what happens, unless it go like 7-0 or something to look completely like a different team, then I would recommend keeping him. But I think to get the culture of losing out of the Giants' taste that has been, the case since pretty much 2012, I think there has to be a clean slate with everyone for head coach, offense coordinator, and defensive coordinator. So unfortunately, that leaves Mike Kafka without a job. I think he'll probably get something somewhere else because he seems to be a well-respected figure, which maybe someone else can explain to me in the comments or what I'm missing or failing to see here. But that's the case, and that's the scenario that the Giants find themselves in for the next, rest of this season. Shane Bowen is still the defensive coordinator, which I don't really understand what he's done at all throughout his time here to really keep him around besides like a continuity thing. Maybe they just were like, get rid of Daboll, everything else we could figure out later this year. I could talk about Shane Bowen until we're blue in the face, but we don't really need to. So I'll talk about Joe Schoen next because he is someone, who is kind of paired with hiring Daboll. They were kind of almost like a package deal, it felt like to me, when they brought them both in, and they leveraged both of their expertise as the soothsayers in Buffalo that were able to find Josh Allen and do all these great things. And I think there's as much blood on Joe Schoen's hands here than there is Brian Daboll's. You're in year 4 of what he was supposed to build, and it's not, John Mara was quoted the other day saying he's built a good, strong core nucleus, but like building a core nucleus shouldn't be based on having success and guys picked in the first 10 picks. Like anyone could do that. You could do it. I could do it. Where you have to be efficient as a general manager is finding, your second, third, and later round picks that have to come in and be productive. And he's whiffed on many of those, including the 2023 draft, which was looking like a complete joke at this point. And I think the biggest joke was the kicker situation from last year that also reared its head this year. It's inexcusable. It's inexplicable. It shouldn't be able to happen. And that's on Joe Schoen more than it is Brian Daboll. There should have been other kickers figured out. They should have also said, hey, after last year when this happened, we can't have Graham Gano on this team anymore. He still could be injured. And look, he was. Now he's got like neck injuries and stuff like that. He's the kicker. How is he hurting his neck? That's neither here nor there. The thing is that they didn't make any changes to figure that out until recently. And it's blown up in their face multiple times. It blew up last year. It blew up with the Judd McCamney game recently too. So that's on Joe Schoen. The blood is on his hands there. Has he done some good things? They found trading up for Jaxson Dart was good, but he's also made terrible trades that he's traded up for. Traded up for Deontay Banks over Joey Porter. He traded up for Jalen Hyatt when the rest of the league saw that he wasn't a guy. And I guess he gets the free pass for the 2022 draft because they just started there and there was a whole, regime change, obviously, after Dave Gettleman. And then, leading up to that draft, his hands, it is under his tenure, but I don't necessarily think he was making all the shot calling as he wasn't there for the pre-draft process as long as really everyone else was. So I think he got a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there and whiffing on Evan Neal and also, Kayvon Thibodeau. But Joe Schoen did make a decision, and we saw it all in the Hard Knocks offseason, to let Saquon Barkley walk for what he would eventually pay like Drew Lock and Darius Slayton, or a combination of Singletary. Like, that money adds up to be what Saquon would have been, and paying Daniel Jones all of that money, but also not fixing the offensive line when Daniel Jones has had neck injuries, knee injuries, and all of the above, and just kind of trotting him out there to die weaponless, So they also made the decision to re-sign Darius Slayton, and they also made the decision for the season to extend Jamie Gillen. These, and to go into the season with Graham Gano again. There are head-scratching decisions that have been made by Joe Schoen, and yes, is Abdul Carter and Jaxson Dart and Scadaboo and some of these other guys having a bright future in the NFL. Yes, that is true, but it should, does it give confidence in Joe Schoen that he's the right man for this job moving forward? When you take away some of those top guys, the rest of the team has not been assembled correctly. So I think someone else should be brought in to kind of be fill those gaps in key positions, because Joe Schoen can say, "Oh, I brought in Adebo, I brought in Holland, I drafted Banks, like I drafted Flott, I drafted Newblin, I drafted Phillips." Well, a lot of those are whiffs, and that's what he built himself. There's no one else to blame. He had his hands all over building the secondary and the linebackers, which they really lack to, they invested in Okereke, but he is what he is at this point, and just him. But there's like two linebackers, and you can't expect two linebackers to play all season, because they don't. So I think, to wrap up my conversation about Joe Schoen, I think he should be tied to Brian Daboll. I don't necessarily think he should be a part of the process of finding the new coach, because they were a package deal to me. They always were. And he made the decision that has turned the Giants into a laughingstock league-wide, nationwide, over the last few years, and it was ultimately that Saquon Barkley decision going with Daniel Jones, which that could set us back way longer than just a couple of years. So I think that's enough for him to not come back. So that's my thoughts on that. And then moving ahead, recently, breaking news today was Jameis Winston is being named the starter over Russell Wilson. It's kind of a no-brainer. Any of us could have seen that coming. If it didn't, that would be a huge issue for us fans, and then also probably the players too. Like, Russell Wilson, as much as he is a locker room guy, a rah-rah guy, he is someone who had a tremendous amount of success in the NFL for a period of time. That guy is no longer the one that we see play. He had the chance against the Cowboys, and ultimately fell short with an interception at the end of the game, and the defense shutting down its leg and giving up the field goal at the end to lose. So I think Jameis is the no-brainer. He's under contract for next season as well, and people love him and want to root for him. And he's an overall great guy. I listened to him on Theo Vaughn's podcast, and I always liked him before, but I loved him a lot more after that. Just hearing him unfiltered talk about the way he views his life, and if Jameis Winston ever has a church and he's a pastor, which seems like could be a good fit for him after all of this is said and done, I would 100% go to one of his sermons, because he's just a great speaker, and he seems like an overall good guy that you want to root for and want to win. More importantly, he gives the Giants a chance to win this upcoming Sunday versus the Packers, more so than Russell Wilson does at this point in his career. He's cooked. And I do think, obviously the offense changes a lot when Jaxson Dart goes down with a concussion. You're not going to have those designed quarterback wraps and runs and powers. But it does open up and gives also an audition for these wide receivers to say, hey, you better get over the jugs machine, because Jameis is going to be slinging it. 90-mile-per-hour fastball coming over the middle on your slant route. You better be ready. I don't care if it's a little cold and my hands aren't warmed up because I'm Darius Slayton, and I can only make insane catches instead of the easy ones. There better not be any excuses for dropped balls and stuff along those lines, because Jameis is going to be slinging it. Might have 3 touchdowns, might have 3 interceptions, but at least it will be entertaining. So coming up to the upcoming matchup this weekend versus the Packers, 1 p.m. at MetLife Stadium. This is one that will be interesting because the Packers just lost to the Eagles on, was that Sunday night or Monday night? I know everyone was kind of like complaining. I didn't watch the game. I was just, had it on my phone a little bit, just check the scores and whatnot. But it was 10-7 final. Packers didn't really get much going. Neither really did the Eagles either. A defensive stalemate, and they ultimately came up short to the Eagles. And they're having an interesting season, the Packers. They have weapons, but they also have a lot of injuries. No one's really truly stepped up around Jordan Love. They have Josh Jacobs at running back, who, has had a lot of success in this league. So I feel like they have good coaching in LaFleur, and where they will try to exploit the Giants, again, will probably be through that rushing attack. If Jacobs is healthy and, looking as good as he can be, then I would probably look for him to have over 60 rushing yards and a touchdown, because this is a Packers team that needs to get back on track. They are 7-point favorites in this one. Having said that, I do like the Giants getting that 7 just for the unknown Jameis Winston factor. It will be a roller coaster ride to see how he looks. But I think with Jameis and how he looked in the preseason when we did see him play, he can find people and sling it and score points. So getting 7 at home, I think I'm fine with the Giants doing that. Even if they lose, I think it'd probably be within a touchdown, even though the defense is, abysmal from a game planning perspective. I do think the offense with Jameis can do enough to score points to keep it, under a touchdown. We're going to have another fun matchup between Andrew Thomas and Micah Parsons. Parsons coming over in the trade earlier in was it like week 1 or the preseason, where he went to the Packers from the Cowboys and turned them into even more of a laughing stock than they already are. But he's going to have a fun matchup versus Andrew Thomas, who's playing, again, when he is healthy, has great seasons. There's nothing you could say really negative about Andrew Thomas. And I'm looking forward to watching that matchup, and you should be too. So if you're ever feeling bored of watching Jameis sling it, just give a little, put your eyes on the left side of the screen or bottom of the screen or top of the screen, depending on, which way they're driving down the field, and give a look at that matchup and see how it looks, because Andrew Thomas has showed up and he's passed every test that he's been given so far. And Micah Parsons is having a defensive player of the year type season as well. So it is another interesting matchup that Thomas has ahead of himself. So looking forward to that one. And that's all I got. There's a lot of changes, throughout the organization. I think, we haven't seen the end of them just yet. But I think they were changes that had to be made to try and move this franchise further along and stop taking steps backwards. I say that now, who the hell knows what's going to be happening. I don't really know from a future head coaching perspective who I really want yet. There's pros and cons to kind of every name I see come up. Really, the main 2 that I am an absolute no to right now are probably Mike McCarthy, because of all just pretty much his slow-mo facial expressions that they show when he was losing games for the Cowboys, where he's just like on the sidelines looking like he's never seen a flag or whatever has happened in the game, and he just looks like kind of clueless. And I don't even care if that's disrespectful to say about him as as a head coach who did have success with Aaron Rodgers at one point. I don't think he's good, and I think he's past that now. I also think Bill Belichick, as much as I think Bill Belichick is one of the greatest football minds of all time, I think it would be going too deep in the well to try and make something work that is probably past its time for working. And his girlfriend or whatever is annoying as hell. I just don't want her in the New York media. I don't want her to be a distraction. I just don't want anything to do with that situation unless she's dumped and we never have to hear her name. Then I would like an angry 73-year-old Bill Belichick coming in, trying to whatever, Bill Belichick revenge tour. But that's the thing too. I just mentioned his age, 73. You know, he's not getting any younger, and I think you could. I don't know. I just 73, man. I mean, he still probably would be young as a president of our country, but all joking aside on that front, I think he's just I don't think he wants to do the pressure and everything, but he has the ties to the organization. And we'll talk about some other names in upcoming videos, but this was just two off the top of my mind. And maybe Gruden is an interesting one, because people have a love and hate relationship with him. I guess enough time. How many years has it been since he got fired for his racist emails? Is that the amount of time that it takes to move on from that stuff? I guess. I mean, if everyone seems ready to give him a job again and Barstool's hired him and he's doing his thing, I guess that is the time, right? Unless, stuff really starts heating up with him and the Giants and there's a whole smear campaign that comes up again, but it's all that, political dirtiness that happens when, people want this job. And I think here's the thing that I want to end this video on. This Giants job is going to be an absolute hot commodity for the young playmakers on this team, specifically Jaxson Dart and Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns playing at the highest level that he's played in. This is a job that people are going to want. People want to take, more specifically, really overall, Jaxson Dart. People want to look at this job and say, hey, I want to coach this kid and bring him to the best of his ability, because there is a shitload of talent there, and it's all about keeping him safe and also bringing it out of him and making other people better in the process. And I think that makes the Giants job very appealing. Let me know what you guys think about the upcoming matchup. Let me know what you guys think about the firing with Daboll, keeping Joe Schoen. Does Mike Kafka have any chance to win the head coaching job? Because the audition starts on Sunday. Have a great rest of your week, y'all.